This is Your Own Best Company, a podcast and community for creative people who value and enjoy working alone. Welcome, everybody, to Your Own Best Company, a podcast for people who love working alone. My name is Franklin Taggart, and my guest today is someone I've met recently in some online networking events. Turns out that we don't live all that far from each other. But Johanna Walker is the fear-blasting storytelling maven for coaches, consultants, leaders, and change makers, also known as a public speaking coach. As a keynote speaker and workshop facilitator, she's presented for corporations, nonprofits, startups, community organizations, and the TEDx stage, helping audiences develop authentic presence as speakers, find the ideas they want to be known for, and craft those ideas into compelling presentations. She also helps people with pronunciation and diction. Johanna is the founder of Craft Your Uniquely You Client-Attracting Change the World Talk, a transformational speaker coaching program for leaders and changemakers, and leads the Speakers Playground, an ongoing practice group for new and seasoned speakers. She's the founder and host of Boulder's Story Slam, Boulder's popular bi-monthly storytelling series, where people from the audience come to the stage and tell true stories about their lives based on a theme for the night. In addition to her work as a speaker and coach, she has written and performed solo theater pieces that she's toured throughout the U.S. and Canada. Whew. You've been busy, Johanna.
Dang.
How are you today? Yeah, it's like those were great bullet points. You nailed it for me.
Cool.
So how are you today?
I am great. I'm great. I love summer. Summer is my season. So I'm great.
Yeah, and I take it you like to get outdoors a little bit?
I like to get outdoors. Usually I do it early in the morning or later in the evening. As I just told you, I just went for a walk in the sweltering midday sun.
Yeah.
And had to do an extra run around the lake to retrieve my keys. So I'm slathered in the heat of the summer.
Do you do okay with the heat?
I love the heat.
Oh, that's wonderful for you. I struggle with it.
Yeah, I grew up in the Midwest and lived on the East Coast for a long time, where the humidity is just like, you know, and so the Colorado heat I can totally roll with.
Well, you're amazing in that way, and amazing in many others. We've got a lot to talk about today. I'd like you to talk a little bit about most of the work that you do with people is helping them get ready for stage and delivering talks on stage. What drew you into that profession, Johanna?
Well, I was a very quiet girl. I was the quietest of the quiet. I went for, I was good. My job was to be good. My job was to get the right answer. If I didn't have the right answer, I didn't risk getting the wrong answer, so I didn't speak. Yeah. And good to me meant quiet. So I stayed quiet for days. I can remember standing at the bus stop at the end of one day, counting on my fingers. Oh, that's 5 days where I didn't say a word.
Oh, wow.
So I was the quiet one, definitely.
Yeah.
But I had stacks and stacks of journals, which kept me alive. It kept me connected to my humanity and my voice. And so later in my mid-20s, I found myself I wrote poetry. I started going to poetry readings. I read my poems. That sort of developed into solo theater performing. And I started working with adolescent girls, which was transformational for me.
Yeah.
To tell my story in a theatrical way and to be heard and to find out that I wasn't the only one who had my experience of quietness.
Yeah.
That there were a whole legacy of women. I really identified when I started coming into my voice, it was really the story of the silence of women's voices being silenced.
Amazing.
And so yeah, it was first through theater and poetry and dance that I found my way to the stage. And then one of my students, I was teaching a solo performance class, and one of my students was invited to give a TEDx talk. She was a high-level consultant who found her way into my class, and I said, sure. She asked me if I could help her, and I said, sure, I'll see what I can do. And at that point, I was a starving artist. I was a hippie. I had no clue about the world of speaking. I was like, yeah, TEDx, that's a thing. This was 10 years ago. And I helped her, and I was like, oh, that was cool. I actually have something to offer.
Wow.
So I reached out to a colleague who had similar theater training as me and who had a business as a public speaking coach. And he kind of took me on under his wing and shared how he was using our theater training in the professional world, and helped me launch a business. And that's how I started. There's a lot more to say, but it was kind of an accident. It wasn't this big vision to start this coaching business, but I found myself helping people, and I found myself, seeing the value that I had to deliver.
Yeah.
And then it was like, oh, I have a business. How did that happen?
All the best careers are happy accidents. That's my belief. They all happen by accident. We didn't expect them or see them coming.
Yeah.
So you started your business as a public speaking coach, and how long ago was that, Johanna?
That was, I think now, I lose track a little, 9 years ago, maybe.
Okay, so you've been at it a while then.
Yeah, 8 or 9 years. I'd have to do the math. Yeah.
What kind of folks find you and really take to what you teach them?
Well, a few different, I say I work with emerging speakers. So I work with generally, I think a great fit for me is somebody who is established in their business. They have a solid business, and they're ready to amplify their message. They're ready to get out there and speak. They're passionate about their work they do, and a little bit scared.
Yeah.
The stage is a scary place. Like, they know there's something to say. They know they have value to deliver. They know speaking is a very powerful tool and a powerful way to connect with clients. And it's a scary place. And, so that's one person that I work with. And then I just work with people who want to connect to the power of their voice. And it's not always tied to a business, but just want to connect to their voice, and want to tell stories, and want to be more visible, and want to take up a little bit more space, want to get out of their comfort zone. Mm-hmm. And so that's really thrilling for me to get to witness and support people in that place.
That's wonderful. And it's so necessary, especially with more and more people who are in helping professions like coaching and consulting, and even people in like counseling and therapy roles are finding themselves needing to get in front of crowds more. And you're right there to help them get ready to go, make it happen. I had asked you in our prior conversation before we recorded the podcast if you wouldn't mind helping the listeners in a specific context. And from the sounds of your own story, you'll be an expert in this context. I also was somebody who was fairly timid when I was growing up. I didn't feel confident in terms of speaking my mind in my peer groups. And that has carried over into some settings in my adulthood. Luckily, I got on stage early in my life through music, and the stage became a very comfortable place. But one of the places that's tricky for a lot of folks that listen to this podcast, and a lot of people that I work with, and in my past, me, the context that is really tricky for a lot of us is in that meeting where there's no structure. And it's like a networking meeting where we're meeting each other for the first time. We're asking usually questions that don't lead to conversations like, what do you do? And who do you work for? And things like that. And I'd asked if you would give us some insight as to how you would approach that kind of a setting in terms of being prepared for it. And you came up with some really wonderful ideas that I'm really excited for you to share. So with that, tell us where you'd like to go.
Yeah, well, it's interesting when you talk about structureless conversations and structureless situations. I love structure.
Yeah.
And structure has always supported me in being connected to my voice and connected to my presence and my engagement. And so I create structures in my life all the time. If the structure isn't there, I create my own structure. And I, at a dinner party, I'll create a structure for engagement, even if sometimes it's just for myself. Sometimes I lightly drop it into the room so that I don't want to be controlling about what's happening, but I have developed a way of just setting up a structure, sometimes just asking a question for the table.
Yeah.
So everybody gets to engage in the question at one time during the night. I have this birthday structure where every birthday I answer tell the 5 highlights of my life in 5 different categories.
Oh, cool.
And so that's been a great way that was how I first started telling stories, was doing my birthday highlights.
Oh, wow.
So I love creating structures. And in the classes, in the groups that I lead, I'm always creating structures, because I think when there's a structure, I'm an improviser, and when there's a structure, there's more room inside the structure to sort of find your way. Because if it's wide open, anything goes. It can be like, where's the ground, and what do I say, and who am I? And a structure can kind of like give you something to push against.
Yes.
So I love finding structure to allow that, just like feeling that wall, that place to push against, allows me to feel myself a little more strongly.
Yeah.
So one of the things I love is a good question. I love a good question. And, in my work, when I'm helping people craft a talk, I take them into a series of questions that they get to dive into. We do this dig, we do this deep dive.
Yeah.
And to pull up, there's the surface of, I want to craft a talk, and I'm pretty sure I know what it is. And there's this layer of what we think we know. And a good question can take you deeper and deeper and deeper into what you didn't even know you knew.
Right.
I love to come with a good question, like something beyond. I sometimes say it's page 10 in the question book. Just go right to page 10 in the question. What do you do? Where do you live? Like, we just answer those questions kind of rotely.
Yeah.
But I love to ask a question like, what's something you did in the last year that you're really proud of?
I like that one.
Or what's something in the last week that knocked your socks off? Or what are you most excited about in your business right now?
Yeah.
So just having a few of those kinds of questions in my pocket that just take the conversation to a deeper level, a level where I want to be when I'm talking to people.
Yeah.
And those kinds of questions just take us there. And my experience is people want to go there too. People want to make meaningful connection.
Yeah.
People want that. And so when you're the one to take the lead on that, even if it's a little terrifying or uncomfortable, or they're going to think I'm weird because I'm asking a question that most people don't ask, most people are really grateful.
Yeah.
And appreciative to go there, because it's unexpected.
Is there anything?
They show a part of themselves they weren't expecting to show.
I love that. And for instance, like one of my favorite questions to ask in a networking meeting is, what was the last piece of art that you bought?
Oh.
So that they can tell me something that's a little bit more personal, rather than let's focus on our professional career stuff here.
Yeah.
And I don't want it to be a demographic survey either. But the thing that strikes me is, how do you, is there a timing factor that you would consider for these questions?
In the conversation, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like how much is too deep, too fast?
That's a great question. I think I tend to feel my way.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of an intuitive thing, and your discomfort is not necessarily a signal that it's, you know, that it's wrong.
Your discomfort just may be because you're there.
Yeah. So sometimes you have to just be willing to be uncomfortable and try something.
Yeah.
You know, and you can start with like, hey, you know, talk about the weather, whatever. Just feel your way into a conversation. But then I like to preface it with, hey, I have a question to ask. Are you, you know,
Yeah.
so you're not just throwing it at them. And it is, I don't know, I've always had something interesting happen.
Yeah.
To just go right for something juicy.
Now, one of the things that you mentioned, your birthday, 5 things.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Talk to me a little bit about other structures like that you could bring into a conversation in an informal or unstructured setting, and introduce that into the conversation.
Introduce that you're saying introduce that structure into the conversation?
Yeah. How would you approach that?
Well, I think it depends. Like the birthday structure, the categories are physical, spiritual, emotional, professional, and sexual.
Okay.
And so on my birthday, I say those 5 highlights, and I've offered the structure to other people and really suggest go for something specific. You know, it's not like the physical highlight was this hike I took. Like, tell me about the hike. Tell me about the highlight of the hike. Tell me what it felt like, and go right into the specificity. Tell me a story. Tell me a story. And so that, for me, is one way to generate stories.
Okay.
You know, so I think it's great. Usually if you ask somebody a question, they're going to ask you back.
Yeah.
You know, so you can think ahead, and obviously you don't want to have it like rehearsed and memorized, and but you can think ahead about how you would answer the question when you have the opportunity.
Right.
So that alone is a structure, is just asking a question and asking it back. Another structure I use a lot to generate stories is first, last, best, worst.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and just thinking of a word.
Okay.
Like teacher. And then think about your first teacher, your last teacher, your best teacher, your worst teacher.
Oh, that's so easy to access.
Yeah, and then what story? So it's like my first teacher or my best teacher, Mrs. Kuba.
Yeah.
And then take me into something that happened with Mrs. Kuba, some moment in time. Stories happen in time and space.
Yeah.
So then I zoom into some moment in time with Mrs. Kuba, and there's a story. So that just can help reveal, just rise to the surface. Stories rise to the surface once you start digging for them.
Yeah.
And I've never tried a structure like that in a networking conversation. I mean, I could imagine saying, "Hey, you want to play a game?"
Yeah, I think that's an interesting,
Let's play a game.
an interesting possibility for sure.
Yeah, let's play a game. First, last, best, worst. Pick a word. Something like that. I would totally dig it if somebody said that to me.
Well, one of the things that I've been really struck.
Have to have that other conversation that's so boring and.
Yeah. I've been struck by the networking meetings online, like the one that we met in, and how they've been facilitated. And a lot of the facilitation is getting into breakout rooms and answering a question or telling a story. And they give you a prompt, and it's like it makes it so much easier. So why couldn't we do that in the live event as well?
Yeah.
I'm a little bit curious. When you approach networking meetings, when you first arrive there, do you tend to kind of look at the room and see what's going on, identify maybe different people or different settings in the room that you'd feel comfortable, putting yourself into? How do you approach the room when you get there?
Well, first of all, I have to say, I'm not sure I remember because it's been a long time. A long time, and I've been to these online networking events where it's has to be a little bit more controlled and structured.
Yeah.
But I think being in the room, which I did go to a networking event maybe 3 weeks ago, And I walk in, before I walk in, I sort of like connect with my, what I know, the truth of who I am. And it's like, yeah, I got this. And I'm a
Yeah.
little bit awkward. I'm already a little bit uncomfortable, you know. And then I walk in. I'm not saying this is the most highly evolved way to do it, but I walk in and I look for safety. Like I
Oh,
immediately look for safety. I immediately scan the room for safety for like, is there somebody I know here?
yeah.
Where's the food table? Where's who's a person who looks friendly? So I immediately scan the room for safety. And I usually start I go towards that. I go towards safety.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's towards the food table or the beverage table, so I get to have something in my hand that's like a grounding thing.
Yes.
Or it's to somebody that I know. And then I can just connect and ground with somebody that I know and have a conversation with somebody that I know. And at this point in my business, like most networking events I go to, there's somebody that I know. Because I'm pretty networked, I'm not going to events where I don't know anybody most of the time.
Yeah.
So once I'm there and I get my ground, then I can kind of like more and more find my way through the crowd and into engaging conversations. And I might go to somebody who's standing alone
Mm-hmm.
and talk to that person. But I definitely start with finding my ground, or maybe it's even just like putting my things at at a table if there are tables, or
Yeah.
somehow like finding my place and my home base, maybe.
Staking your claim.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's how I operate as well. Thinking about then, you did mention finding people who seem to be kind of not talking to anyone yet, or who maybe are kind of quiet.
Uh-huh.
Those folks seem to be right in your, customer, in your client avatar, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't only work with, it's interesting because fear shows up in a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
Fear shows up in a lot of different ways. And some people like might be totally comfortable in a networking event, and it's different. Like I'm like you, I've always been comfortable on stage.
Yeah.
And it's in social situations where I get uncomfortable. And for other people, it's flipped. They can just like work a room like nobody's business, but getting on stage is scary. And
Yeah.
I think we all have our edge. And so I can sometimes be very surprised by the people who find me. And I think everybody, like anybody who knows their edge and knows what that leap is, like getting over that edge and taking that leap is scary. And that looks different for different people.
It does.
And some people it's about like, yeah, I feel pretty confident on stage, but showing my vulnerability or my humanity, that's scary. Or that's
Yeah. The line between what's professional and what's personal is scary for them.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Or just like, I think fear can show up as procrastination.
Yeah.
I feel like I find people who on the surface are confident and they're like, oh yeah, public speaking is no big deal for me at all, but they just don't do it.
Right.
It's like procrastination sets in, and it's like a kind of unconscious underground fear that they would never quite call fear, but it's keeping them from taking that next step. So yeah, it can look a lot of different ways.
Going back to your birthday structure of the 5 different categories, what are some examples of questions that you ask in those categories?
Those are no questions.
Oh, they aren't questions. They're just the reflections that you have.
What's your highlight?
Oh, okay.
It's your 5 birthday highlights. And so in
Okay.
those categories, you just say your physical highlight, your emotional highlight, and go through the highlights.
Oh, cool. Okay, I understand now.
Yeah.
I get it.
And certainly that could be a question, like, tell me a highlight from the last year. Tell me a highlight from the last month.
Yeah.
Personal highlight, a professional highlight, gets people thinking and chewing on their lives.
Yeah.
So it's a gift you're giving because they get to reflect. They get to reflect and celebrate.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I'm a little bit curious about during the quarantine times and different times when we've been in isolation for the last year and a half. What were some of the opportunities that presented themselves to you during that time where people needed help with their storytelling or with their presenting, with their public speaking, maybe in a virtual realm?
Yeah, that was a big one. It was really interesting for me initially, like when when lockdown first happened, I thought, I needed to unplug. I was too busy and I needed a pause. So I kind of just took a pause and I was like, we'll be back in June or July.
Mm-hmm.
So it's okay to just pause for a couple of months because we'll be back in action in June or July. and then summer came along. I was like, oh, that's not actually what's happening.
Yeah.
So, I mean, maybe it was sooner than that I discovered that, but what I did was I found myself in online networking groups, and I said, hey, I speak, and this is who I speak to. This is what I speak about.
Mm-hmm.
And what groups do you know? What groups do you know that are looking for speakers? So right away, it expanded in many ways, expanded opportunities for speaking.
Yeah.
And I could speak. I spoke to a group in Chicago, and I could, from my living room or my office.
Yeah.
So that was really cool. And it was, I think the two things were showing up online with heart and humanity, mm-hmm. and making that connection through the screen. A lot of the work that I do is about connecting. I help people connect because on stage you can feel it. When you're on stage, you can feel so separate from your audience.
Yeah.
So how do you bring that humanity? How do you bring that connection? And how do you do it through the screen so that you feel the connection? Because you don't get, when you're in the room, you feel the breath and the murmur and the physicality of people in the room. And there's a give and take of energy that you can feel that's palpable. That on screen, it's not the same. So it's like, how do you get fed by your audience? How do you generate that energy through the screen so that you're still alive and vibrant and vital and connected?
Yeah.
So that was definitely one thing. And then also always with stories. Stories are such a powerful way to connect, especially when you're on the screen. It's like, okay, tell a story and, get to the other side of the screen.
Has storytelling always come very naturally for you?
I think yes. Yes. As a quiet, shy girl, when I had a story, I was not scared.
Yeah.
When I had a story, that was like, okay, I got something to say. I'm good. I tell the story, And so I did, and I do feel like I have I have Southern roots. My grandparents were from Alabama. We did sitting on porches. They told family stories. So there was something in my bones that I feel like I got stories. Like I got them.
Yeah. And
so I have always enjoyed and been able to tell a story skillfully. And I will also say that since I've been doing the Story Slam for the last 8 or 9 years, I have gotten so much better at telling stories. Like when I started the Story Slam, I thought I was a good storyteller. But listening to hundreds of stories over the last years, I have really, I've been teaching it a lot more.
Yeah.
And I've been listening to so many stories, and I can just listen to a story and and I know exactly how to tweak it and twist it and turn it so that it becomes a compelling story. So I've learned so much about telling stories. I was intuitively a good storyteller from the get-go.
Yeah.
But I've learned so much from listening to stories and from teaching.
Do you feel like the journaling helped that at all?
Yeah, I would say, yeah. Because I was always writing the story of my life.
Yeah, you were learning how to articulate, right?
Yeah.
That's very cool. You reminded me, I think our grandparents' generation I recall so many situations where, they would visit each other. And the visit was about telling stories to each other. And it's like, I feel like that we've lost some of that. It was kind of built into their way of life. And, my grandparents, I don't think they lived 100 miles away from where they grew up, So it was like they knew everybody, and family members would just stop by.
Yeah.
And so they were really adept, just out of necessity, at being able to say what was going on for them.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. And I think there's definitely a resurgence of storytelling. And it's still, I find a lot with people that I work with that a lot of people don't actually know what a story is.
Yeah.
They think they're telling a story, but there's not really a story there.
Yeah. It's more like just information, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Data.
Yeah. And so I find it really fun to get in there and find the story. And I was just teaching in my Speakers Playground group, which is the ongoing practice and training group I lead.
Yeah.
We were just working with storytelling, and the stories that people came in with were big stories, like big stories, big, this is my story, and the big life stories. And I must tell a story that is meaningful and profound and has deep lessons. And those are beautiful and important and necessary stories to tell. And, it can be hard to find it sometimes. So I was really encouraging them to tell smaller stories, because when you're telling a smaller story, you can really find the arc of it, like just the benign stories of our day, to find that arc of the story, the beginning, middle, end. What's the change? What's the transformation? When was the turning point moment? That can really help you understand the structure of a story.
Yeah.
So that then it's like, oh, I get this. And then when I tell the big story, I've got it. Like I was telling them yesterday, I have a niece and nephew who live in Denver. They're now 16. They're about to have their 16th birthday.
Yeah.
And I moved to Colorado 1 month before they were born. So I've lived in Colorado for 16 years. So I've been very close to them their whole life.
Yeah.
And when they were about 4, I think they were about 4, I was driving in the car with them, and one of them said, "Jojo, tell us a story about our mom when she was little." And I said, okay. And I told a story about my sister. Tell us another one. Tell us another one. Tell us a story about you. Tell us a story about when you were sick. Tell us a story about when you got in a fight with a friend. Tell us a story about when you got in trouble. Like, one, they really wanted the hard stuff.
Yeah.
They really wanted the hard stuff. And 2, they were wrapped with attention. For 3 hours, I think. We got out of the car and got home, and I told stories all evening. And
Wow.
I didn't run out of stories. They didn't run out of questions, and I didn't run out of stories. And then every time I would go visit, they'd come, "Jojo, tell us a story, tell us a story." And I had to keep finding stories, because they were very, "Oh, no, you've told us that one. No, you've told us that one before. We've heard that one before. Tell us another one." So I had to keep finding new stories. And I had to, and they always wanted them to be true.
Yeah.
Anna was very clear. She didn't want any horses flying, some flying horse to enter the scene. She was like, "No, horses don't fly. I don't want any flying horses." So
No sci-fi fantasy, Aunt Jojo. No, we don't want that. Too funny.
So I started really learning how to make a story out of just a very benign thing from my day.
Yeah.
Any choice, any turn, any change in direction, that's a story. And so it really helped me see the arc of a story, the turn of a story, the change in a story, how to build that. So that's what I was really encouraging them yesterday. Like, you don't have to tell the big dramatic story.
No.
Tell the little story and find the stakes, find the drama. Because we're living, every day there's stakes, there's drama, there's some choices we make, there's change, and those are stories.
For those who don't know, Speakers Playground is the group that Johanna offers, that's basically for people to practice and learn and have fun together as they get the craft of speaking into their box of tricks. If you want more information about Speakers Playground, visit johannawalker.com/Speakers Playground. And she said, I'd like to invite listeners to be a guest at Speakers Playground anytime.
Yes.
So definitely check that out. Sounds like a fun group.
It's great. It's great. And I think the fun helps crack the patterns. Like patterns of fear and nerves can be kind of rigid. And so if you go work on it head on, they can grip a little harder.
Yeah.
They get stubborn, and they're like, oh, when they get wind of you stepping into your power, those patterns want to just like clamp down. So the play, the spirit of the class, the playfulness, the improv, the experimentation and curiosity is really the culture of the class. And so when we get into that spirit, it's just like there's a lot of freedom and flexibility and possibility and celebration. There's a great crew of folks who are taking risks also. So
yeah,
I think it's a very effective way to crack loose those patterns.
Sounds wonderful. It sounds like a really great experience. Can you tell us a little bit more about the Boulder Story Slam? Now, were you a founder of that particular group, or?
I was. I founded that with my partner. Cool. I was working with a friend, and we created Truth Be Told when it started I can't remember when, 8-9 years ago. It was Truth Be Told. And we were in a partnership I think it's been about 2 years now that she moved on. I carried on. That's when the dairy stepped in to partner with me. So now the dairy is actually producing it. And I founded it. I'm so grateful to have the support from the dairy. And it's a fantastic. We just had one last week and it was so fun. There's a theme for the night.
Yeah.
People from the audience put their name in the hat if they want to tell a story. People always think, do I have to tell a story? No, you don't have to. There are 250 people in the audience.
Yeah, we wouldn't get through all of you. No.
Yeah. So if your name gets picked, you come to the stage and tell a story. There's a 5-minute time limit, and then the audience votes on the best story. So it's competitive storytelling. We ask you to come up and be vulnerable and share your heart and your truth, and then we judge you.
What was the theme in this past one?
The theme was camp.
Oh my gosh. I immediately thought of 10 things.
That's great.
So when is the next one coming up?
The next one is September 12th.
Okay.
I'm co-hosting with Daryl Purpose, who's a songwriter.
Oh, cool.
Do you know him?
I know Daryl for years. Yeah.
Oh, cool. Awesome.
Wonderful.
We met on OkCupid.
Oh, how cool. Daryl's a wonderful guy.
Yeah.
He's got a lot of stories to tell as well. He's a brilliant storyteller.
Yeah, for sure. So that'll be fun. I haven't quite landed on the theme either. The ones I'm thinking of are, the reason it's hard is because there's a story I want to tell. Okay. I don't always tell a story. I used to always tell a story, but I don't always tell a story. I really want to create space for other people to tell stories.
Yeah.
But I want to tell one because I have a story I want to tell, and I'm trying to think of a theme that fits for this story. My first thought was card. But card doesn't really inspire stories.
Not right off the bat?
Yeah, not right off the bat. Then neighbor.
That goes a little further for me.
That goes further for you?
Yeah.
Left was one. I kind of like left the verb, but I feel a little worried that it would bring too many political stories.
Yeah.
What else was I thinking of? Oh, nemesis.
Oh, I love that one.
What do you think about nemesis?
Oh, that's awesome.
Maybe I'll go with nemesis.
I love that one.
Okay.
I think you landed on it.
The vote is counted.
So September 12th, at the Dairy Center in Boulder. And at what time does it start?
It's at 7.
Okay. And for more information about the Story Slam, let's give people a link for that as well. StorySlamBoulder.com. Okay, very good.
The other thing I'm doing with the Story Slam, which has been so, what is the word? Just deeply satisfying has last year, after George Floyd was murdered, I had a story slam coming up, and I was trying to figure out, like, do I change the theme? It felt so irrelevant, like it was right in the heat of so much uprising, and it just felt kind of strange to be doing a slam. But I thought, oh, if I change the theme to race, like that could just be a disaster. If just hand the mic to people in a hot moment and have to talk about race could be really, harmful. So I wanted to do that. I wanted to use the platform in a way that could engage the conversation about race and to do it in a thoughtful way. So I went ahead with that slam, and I decided that the next slam I would do the theme of race, but I would invite people to join a workshop to develop stories in the context of anti-racism work, in the context of relationship building. So I worked with 8 people. I reached out to a friend, a Black man that I co-led the workshop with, and we invited a mixed race group of people together and dug into stories about, this is how race has impacted my life. Questions, just asked a lot of questions to inspire stories, and amazing stories came forward, and amazing relationships were built. And so that ended, and we did the next, it wasn't a competitive slam, but they shared their stories at a public event, and it was amazing. Yeah. Stories were amazing. And I think one of the relationships that were built are still like, we did it again then this spring, and both groups are just like fell in love.
That's so cool.
So we're doing it again. That event will be November 7th.
Yeah.
And I don't know if any of your listeners want to participate. In September and October, we're going to be doing another workshop. And we do it by donation. We donate the proceeds of the event to a nonprofit devoted to anti-racism work. Okay. So, if any of your listeners want to hear about that, definitely reach out.
Well, I will definitely make sure that this episode will be released in plenty of time for them to make that decision. So make sure, folks, if you're interested in that particular workshop.
And that will be virtual. That'll be virtual. The workshop. Okay. Carol lives in LA, so the workshop will be virtual, and the show, we've done the last 2 shows we did online, but this show we're going to do in person and stream in anybody from afar.
That is so cool.
So there will be a bigger audience. Yeah.
It sounds like in a lot of ways, your approach helped people to go ahead and go there and not avoid it. I love that.
Yeah. And I think, honestly, people of color have more experience doing that. They're living in their racism is in their face every day. So telling those stories are more at their, they're telling them all the time. And white people, not so much.
Yeah.
We don't really think about our whiteness very much. We don't think about, and I think one of the big ahas for a lot of the white people was, oh, a story about race doesn't actually have to be about my relationship with a person of color.
Yeah.
The story about race is my relationship with my whiteness. And so those were really interesting stories to dig up and tell.
It sounds amazing.
Yeah.
Well, Johanna, we could go on for hours, it seems. And it feels like we've only just gotten started.
Yeah.
But I do want to mention that you have some things to offer some folks. One of them is that you have a free download for people. It's 10 tips to tell stories that attract clients and have a greater impact. Is there anything you'd like people to know about that particular download, or you just want them to find out for themselves?
Well, I guess what I'll say is, one, it looks at how to tell a story, but when you're telling a story as a speaker, it's really important that the story be relevant to your audience.
Yeah.
That it's not just about you. It's not just about you telling your story. It's how do you tell your story in a way that opens a door for your audience, and you tell it in a way that really speaks to them. So that specifically looks at, what is the arc of a story? How do you make it compelling? And how do you make it totally relevant to your audience? That's when they lean in to say yes.
Very cool. To access that download, johannawalker.com/betterstories is where you will find that one. And I also want to just kind of put a plug in for following Johanna on LinkedIn. And one of the reasons that I'm going to recommend that is because I find that the posting that you put up on LinkedIn, first of all, you practice what you preach. You tell great stories on LinkedIn. In addition to that, you always have a way of offering some really lovely value to people who take the time with your posts. So you can find Johanna on LinkedIn under Get Real Public Speaking, which is also the name of her practice. And she is on Instagram at Johanna Walker Speaking and on Facebook at Get Real Public Speaking as well. And I'll remind people again, if you want information about the Story Slam, it's storyslamboulder.com. Anything else you'd like to leave us with today, Johanna?
I think just what you have to say matters. So no matter how uncomfortable it is, somebody needs to hear it. Somebody wants the gold that is in your voice in your story.
Well, I know that people got a really good feel for how you work today, and I appreciate the insights and the tips that you brought to the table. And more importantly, I appreciate the permission that you've just given us. So thank you, Johanna, for being my guest today.
You're welcome. Great talking to you.
People who work alone aren't antisocial, at least not most of us. If people think you're weird because you don't want to grow a big company and you'd rather spend most of your time working by yourself, you're just hanging around the wrong people. Your Own Best Company has a Facebook group that you're invited to join right now. We understand the urge to close the door, let your imagination run wild, and stay there until your creative impulse runs its course. We also understand the features and challenges that go along with running a business to support our solo flight lifestyles. Joining the group is free, and it's as easy as clicking the link in the channel description. So go there now and just join the group. Want to hear more where this came from? Subscribe to Your Own Best Company on your favorite podcast app or on the Franklin Taggart Coaching and Consulting YouTube channel. To get in touch with Franklin, send an email to yobc@franklintaggart.com. Thanks for listening.